I know I'm not the only one noticing how bad the bot comments are getting on any video discussing evidence that the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk may not have been on the political left, but in fact on the far black-pilled alt-right. We know that the regime is desperate to preserve this narrative, this false narrative that they came out with like straight out of the gate as soon as it was announced that Charlie had been shot. Immediately, social media was exploding with alt-right creators who have kind of like a similar narrative, women screaming at liberals and saying, how could you? And immediately Donald Trump and others were saying it was the radical left. We saw Nancy Mace, who never misses an opportunity to be transphobic, claim that it must have been a trans person, even though we had no information. And then as more and more has come out over the last few days, which has been a fascinating and also just heartbreaking commentary on what it is that young white boys and men are being exposed to in the United States, and that whole pipeline, that radicalization that so many are falling under. It really, really calls into question the narrative that we're getting from the regime. They kind of jumped the gun a little bit, right? No information whatsoever. They made a presumption with zero evidence to back it up about who the shooter was and what his politics must be, despite the fact that we have seen over the last, I think it's 2, 3, 4 years that the only threats that I've been able to find in the media against Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA have been from folks who were further on the right than he was. So I'm getting a lot of bot comments, and they're all very similar, really easy to tell that it's a bot. An account with not very many followers, and they'll have a bunch of videos, but a lot of them will be duplicates and they won't have a real profile picture. And the wording's always just like, it's a little weird. And a lot of them are saying things like, oh, Tyler's roommate was a trans woman, so that proves he's on the left. Or I heard NPR say he's on the radical left. Yeah, they're pretty pathetic. I hope most people can see right through them. But then in the last, less than 24 hours, I am seeing a new bot comment repeatedly. I saw it not just in my videos about this subject, but also on other creators. I regret not screenshotting before I blocked those accounts. The comment goes something like this, though. Charlie Kirk was the only one protecting America from Nick Fuentes. Or Charlie Kirk was the only one protecting America from the far right. And then it concludes, but you hateful leftists took him out, and who's going to protect us now? Something like that. Again, I've seen 5 or 6 comments like this, and I'm like, this is the narrative that's now being painted, that Charlie Kirk stood between America and Nick Fuentes and the black-pilled white supremacist grapers. Really are trying to paint this image of him as a Christ-like figure. I've heard multiple comparisons made between him and Jesus Christ, him and Martin Luther King Jr. Obviously, the regime is trying to make a martyr out of him. They're trying to use him in death for their own political ends. But I just found this line really interesting. I actually talked with my kids about it because, again, we talk about all of this stuff when you have teens and young adults. These are good conversations to be having. They can educate me. I can make sure that they are not going down some alt-right pipeline. Open, non-judgmental communication. So I was talking with my kids and showing them the comments, and one of my children said, Charlie Kirk was the only one protecting America from Nick Fuentes and the grapers? Charlie Kirk was the only one protecting America from what's further to the right? What about Osmond Gold? What about Ben Shapiro? What about Steven Crowder? Who, by the way, the day, like 12 hours after Charlie Kirk died, Steven Crowder changed his profile on social media, on Twitter, I believe. It used to say #2 conservative podcaster or whatever, and he changed it to #1. Right, we knew that Steven Crowder had big beef with Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk bumped him out. And yet we didn't see any MAGA going to Steven Crowder and saying, how disrespectful. You couldn't even wait 12 hours? You didn't mourn him appropriately? No criticism for Steven Crowder. I just find this really interesting. In life, Charlie Kirk was not seen as these right-wing podcast bros, they're a dime a dozen. There's so many of them. But suddenly now it's like Charlie Kirk was the only one. These guys are all chopped liver. They don't even exist. I find that weird, revisionist history, and also, I don't know. I don't understand the desperation. I understand the desperation from the regime because, damn, you only need look at how bad the economy is doing, how terrible Donald Trump's approval numbers are, to understand why the regime is trying to sow any political discord that they can, why they are trying to, potentially incite political violence. I understand why the oligarchy, I understand why the billionaires want to create this kind of conflict, this kind of division, and stoke infighting amongst the working class. Right, because of course there's always this fear from the oligarchs, from the regime, that the more they crack down, the more they make life miserable for everybody, including their base. They are going to make life miserable for every working class person. Yeah, they're targeting immigrants, they're targeting trans folks. Right now, in particular, they are targeting Black folks across the United States. I just read a jobs report that said Black women in particular are losing their jobs at a higher rate than any other demographic. You think that's not targeted? That's fucking targeted. Right, and we cannot pretend that everybody is suffering the same under Trump, but it's still true that everybody is suffering or will very soon be suffering. A lot of people haven't really felt the pinch yet. A lot of the terrible things he wants to do haven't quite reached them yet. They are more insulated, more protected. But it will happen. It will happen, y'all. The super rich in this country are fucking every last one of us. So what they really don't want conservative working class people in this country to realize is that the source of their suffering and their oppression and their lower quality of life is not like Democrats, it's not trans people, it's not Black folks, it's not immigrants. It's the super rich, it's the billionaires. It's the billionaire in the White House and the world's richest man who funded to the tune of $250 million that guy's candidacy. It's the billionaires in Trump's government. It's the fucking Peter Thiels. Oh, and didn't Bill Gates meet with Donald Trump the other day? Because there's no good billionaires. I don't give a shit how many foundations they have or how much philanthropy they do. By the way, you should go watch my video on how philanthropy is a scam. It just reinforces the billionaire's power. Anyway, I realize I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, and I do understand the regime has a vested interest in pushing this narrative that Charlie Kirk was like a Christ-like figure, and that they want to whip up all of the base and perpetuate this false narrative that Tyler Robinson is on the political left, despite, again, growing evidence to the contrary. I understand why the regime is doing that. I understand why Fox News and other media, because so much of corporate legacy media is bought and paid for by the regime. Go ahead and Google Paramount merger if you want to understand what I'm talking about. And I know that so many people in our society, right? The MAGA base is 25-30% of America. I know that they are conditioned to uncritically accept what Trump says and what Fox News says as absolute fact. They are not being exposed to accurate information about this issue. And I know the bots are working overtime to try to reinforce that narrative. And I asked this at the end of a video yesterday, but what can we do? What can we do to counter that? What can we do to raise awareness of the fact that Tyler is probably not on the left? Signs are indicating that he is further right than Charlie Kirk, and he's part of incel, meme war, black pill, chronically online 4chan culture. That this is right on right crime, that this is infighting, conflict between two factions on the far right in this country. And my question continues to be, what will break through? What will be the thing that gets this message to break through to MAGA in a way that they can receive it? As I said yesterday, when I asked a friend of mine who's an expert in this area about this, they said, well, who's the trusted messenger? Who's the messenger that MAGA will listen to who is willing to talk about the fact that it's not the radical left and that this conflict is manufactured to stoke up more divide between working class people in the United States so that we take our attention off of our oppressor and we just brutalize each other, dehumanize each other, while the regime continues to strip us of our rights, our prosperity, our quality of life. What messenger on the political right that MAGA trusts is willing to deliver that message? I don't know. I haven't identified one. It's certainly not going to be Osmond Gold or Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder. What do you think? Is there a way that messaging can break through while the bots are working overtime and the regime is pushing their narrative really hard?